Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villere's Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villere's provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villere's Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency, 504-556-0809 or davemietteINSagency.com.
For over 48 years, Southern Tires and Auto Repair has provided services across the New Orleans metro area. Southern Tires offers a range of tires for all vehicles and ATVs. We also have a full suite of auto repair options, including brake repair, rim repair, custom exhaust, steering and suspension, and so much more. Southern Tires and Auto Repair, 2550 Hickory Avenue in Metairie.
Cnc Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, Cnc provides patient-centered care for your entire family. Cnc Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Of course, we're live from our Pontchartrain production studios. And you can not only catch us live on WLAE-TV, we are now live streaming on the WLAE-TV YouTube page. So those of you that can't stay with us a full hour on the television, you can go to one of your iPads, your phone, and check us out as we live stream each and every Thursday at this time on YouTube. As always, we'll cover all the home teams, the Saints, the Lsu Basketball, Tulane Green Wave, the Pelicans, the UNO Privateers, and joining us today, one of my favorite guests. He can cover everything. He's my colleague over at 106.1 FM, of course, part of the All Access team, one of the major parts of CrescentCitySports.com, and also the voice of the UNO Privateers. Jude Young joins us on the program today. Jude, welcome to the show.
It is a pleasure. Of course, we're heading into baseball season, so it's good to say that you load the bases for us, and then we follow on 106.1 with All Access and try to clean the bases with a great audience that you bring in. We certainly are proud to have you as part of the family. And again, that's from 6 to 7 after Eric's show on 106.1 FM. Ken Trahan and I handle All Access, and of course we also co-own CrescentCitySports.com, where we're always busy. There's no off season and plenty to cover between looking ahead to the next football season, college basketball, the Pelicans heating up, and high school sports. A lot of state championship tournaments going on right now, so that keeps us awfully busy as well.
Well, I don't think this, and I tell this to people all the time, there is not a more comprehensive site when you want to talk about local sports in this city than CrescentCitySports.com. I mean, there are some that cover high school. There are some that cover the pros or college. You guys cover it all. I mean, everything. And then the writers, some of the best writers that, again, we have in this city that are part of your site as well.
Guys that come on this great show like Les East and Renee Nadeau, having an affiliation with Ed Daniels with his great editorials. And we have a real focus at Crescent City Sports, which is important, on analysis, but doing things the right way. We want to report on stories. At times we have the ability to be first, but it's also very important for us to continue to foster those relationships so we can give you the right analysis and the right news as it happens and after it happens. It's really important to do things in a certain professional way. And New Orleans and Louisiana in general, if there's any place that's about relationships, it's these areas, and we understand that as locals.
Yeah, and again, between the Twitter feed, which again is constantly being updated, to of course again the great stories that are there, I highly recommend CrescentCitySports.com. Let's get started. We'll start with the New Orleans Saints. I found out today that at least right now, The NFL salary cap floor is going to be about $180 million. That's up $5 million from the earlier projections. They're still working on an extension of the TV deal, which could possibly maybe affect this. Although again, I wouldn't hold my breath on it. 180 looks like it might be it. Look, the biggest issue was worried about the COVID-19 losses. With a new TV deal with a 17-game schedule, they're going to offset those losses over the next couple seasons. There's been a lot of talk about with the ownership and the NFLPA of, instead of again trying to take that hit all in this year, to go spread that out over a couple of years. And that makes good sense, not just for the owners, but also for the players, because that's jobs and that's contracts, that's money. So it'll be interesting to see again how this kind of plays out. For the Saints, again, it helps them just a little bit closer to, again, getting even with the salary cap. Although, again, they're right now, some projections have them about $78 million over the cap. What are your thoughts on the cap? And do you expect us to see maybe another bump? Or is this pretty much it right now at $180 million?
I don't know if we can expect anything for sure, but if we believe the reports that the broadcast rights could lead to something along the lines of a 70 to 100% increase in revenue there, then you'd have to think the league wants to take advantage of that and not completely screw up 32 front offices who have a long-term plan in place that was expecting incremental increases in the salary cap, like the New Orleans Saints, who are at the very bottom as far as cap situations go right now. You've got to give these teams the opportunity, knowing that guaranteed income is going to come, to be able to deal with these big salaries that they have. And the Players Association is also involved with this, and they understand it too, that you've got guys that are due to be paid, and they're the ones who are going to suffer across the board. You just happen to be a free agent at the wrong time in a sport where you have a very short shelf life because of the physical toll it takes on your body. Come on, they're going to figure this out. So I expect it to bump up more. I don't know how much more, but I would be surprised if it's not at least, say, $5 million more, because that little bit can go a long ways as far as filling out the roster. If not, some veterans are going to be cheated here, and that's just going to lead to more acrimony between the union and the owners. The owners, I would think, want this too, because if everybody knows the money's coming in, we learned during the pandemic, even when you can't put fannies in the seats, you can put the games on television and make that money. Knowing that's always going to be there, I think they'll figure it out, and they'll come up with a more equitable salary cap that takes care of both sides.
Yeah, and I would agree. And look, I don't know how much more we can see. I would agree with you, maybe another $5 million. I don't think it's going to be, again, it was supposed to be around $198 million to start. I don't think we're going to get to that point where we'll see an increase of about $18 million to get them even where they thought they were going to be. But I do think it's smart on the part of ownership and also, again, the Players Association to take these COVID-19 losses and spread them out over a few years, not taking a major hit this year and next year, especially again with new income coming in.
Right.
And I think that's got to be the thought process there. And also, again, look, I've said it. I want to get your opinion on this, even though again I've heard you talk on your radio show about it. Look, I believe that Loomis has a plan, and has had a plan all along for this. Now, again, the monkey wrench thrown in here with COVID-19 losses, which, again, some of that is going to be tough to absorb. But at the same time, there's always been a plan for post-Drew Brees, how they were going to handle the salary cap, especially with, again, the great classes, draft classes coming up, a lot of those guys coming up for their second contracts. They've had a plan all along.
Right, and you always have the cornerstone players on your roster that you know you're going to keep for many years. You borrow from the future as far as the salary cap goes as it is. Maybe you borrow a little bit more from the future. You make slightly longer contracts in order to be able to spread out those cap hits to make it work. My guess is that's what they're going to have to do. Sure, at the same time, they're going to have to make some tough decisions because you've got some guys on the roster that are making too much salary to make it work, and you've got the free agents to deal with. But I have no doubt that they'll figure it out, and this will be a strong roster. I think without a huge offseason as far as the draft and maybe even undrafted free agents, it won't be the roster we've seen the last 3 or 4 years, which compared to any in the league, but it'll still be plenty good enough to compete pending how good the quarterback position works out.
We're going to get into that in a moment. See, I'm of the opinion they've already got it mapped out. Again, players have to agree to this, obviously. There'll be some players that will say, you know what, man, with Brees maybe moving on, maybe they'll be looking elsewhere. But I think the core of this team probably wants to stay together because they realize this is still a Super Bowl contender with the right quarterback. It's in place. They've had a year. They've seen Jameis Winston all through the season. They have at least a feeling for what they have there. So we'll see how that goes. Right now, last week, Nick Easton was released. It was expected, multiple concussion problems. Sean Mazzano was on my radio show this week. He called him the best offensive lineman at the guard position that the Saints had this year. And that's not too far off when you really start thinking about what happened in terms of, again, him being able to get in and be able to come in and substitute when there's been an injury there. With that said, he was an expected cap casualty, and with the concussions, nobody knew if he was going to come back as well. We know, again, that they're amortizing the Drew Brees cap hit, $24 million over a couple seasons. They've already reduced his salary to about $1 million. There's been a couple other players that did not get involved in the team last year because of COVID-19 that were released. So they've opened up somewhere between $30 and $40 million in the cap now, and I'm sure they're working more toward, again, getting to at least even on the cap. And that's going to take some maneuverability with some contracts that are on the team presently, but also extending veterans as well.
Right, and there's some moves they haven't made yet. You talk about extending veterans. I think that there's something amicable at a lower overall salary they can come to with Janoris Jenkins. I think you really need to keep him because you don't have anybody at the boundary corner outside of Lattimore being a free agent and obviously Jenkins, so that's a no-brainer. Quan Alexander's not guaranteed any money, so that contract's clearly going to disappear.
That's $13 million right there you pick up.
So that's big, and there are just other veterans on the roster that can restructure. And it's easy for them to make that decision, even if they're not sure about just how good the Saints are going to be, even if that is something that's totally up in the air in their minds. Because every time you do that with a veteran who's already entrenched on the team and doing well, unless he's unhappy for some reason, he's going to get more upfront money in the form of bonus to be able to make that work. That's how those contracts are structured. So it's easy for them to make those decisions. Again, I have no doubt the Saints will get there and they'll have a strong roster. It is much more of a concern of how it's going to work out at quarterback. Even if the defense isn't quite as good, quite as deep, the offense might wind up being more versatile and better, if not consistent like you had with the Drew Brees at quarterback. So many questions to answer there, but I think they'll have the talent to do it if they get the production behind center.
Let's talk a little bit about contracts, and of course, you got two big ones that are coming up with Ryan Ramshack and Marshawn Lattimore. I fully expect there was a time when I didn't think Lattimore would get the contract. When you look at the landscape of the NFL right now, in terms of corners, he's going to get paid, whether it's here or elsewhere. More than likely, they're going to try to hold on to him. I think both guys get extended this year with dummy years on the contract, very, very low cap figure in the first year or so. So again, they're able to overcome this cap hell they're in right now.
Right, and those two are young enough that it becomes a deal where they might benefit even more from the upfront money and an even longer term deal than what the Saints would normally do with players. Ramczyk being an offensive lineman, he's played through some minor injuries, but he's been reliable, an Iron Man type for the most part. You feel good about a long-term tackle's ability to not only stay on the field, but stay at a high level. You'll worry a little bit more about Lattimore because of his long-term hamstring issues. He's a more slight-built corner, so he gets banged up more. But that's usually true of most guys at that position, and you've got to have people who can cover. There's no way that you can say, well, we can make up for it in the draft and think you're going to contend in the next couple of years, even if you believe that you can target the right guy at that 28th overall pick. But you're almost forced to use that pick for a cornerback, and you don't want to be forced to look at a specific position versus taking the best player available, which has served the team so well. So I think when it's all said and done, both of those guys wind up being long-term solutions to the cap issues and long-term players for the Saints with new deals.
Two players that are unrestricted free agents this year that have really captured the headlines: Marcus Williams, Trey Hendrickson. Talk about those two guys, expectation on them coming back.
You know, I have a different view of Marcus Williams than a lot that I'm seeing. More and more people are, you know, analysts will say, I'll even hear fans say that they think that he's indispensable. And look, he's become a solid player, but I don't know if you want to be in a situation with this offseason where there could be a bidding war with teams with more cap room who want to pay him $9-10 million a year. Is he worth that as a player who, when he makes a play, it's the obvious play on the ball, a poorly thrown ball, and he's there, but he's more of the true definition of a deep center field safety. The last line of defense helps you prevent more of the deep balls becoming a problem. Preventing those explosive plays are important, but is he a playmaker, a difference maker, when you might be able to find another solution to pair with Malcolm Jenkins and make it work for another couple of years? I don't know, but Hendrickson's much tougher because he could really be blossoming. This couldn't be a situation where it's just it hit at the right time and he had his career year. I think he's going to be a threat as an edge pass rusher for a long time, and those guys truly make a difference.
Yes,
he made difference-making plays because of his ability to get to the quarterback. I don't know if they can do it, though, because I don't think they're completely decided on Davenport yet. You've got another year before you have to deal with him. And I do think that they like their overall depth at that position, and they can get by and then draft another young guy. Hendrickson's going to get paid, and I just don't know. As good as Loomis and company are with dealing with the cap, I just don't know if it adds up with the need for edge pass rushers in the NFL that the Saints are going to be able to afford what he's going to get on the street.
I agree. You'd like to think that, again, he would be able to stay because you can soften the blow over the first couple seasons with again, and advertising that, which is going to be a big signing bonus for him. But again, there's a decision to be made. You got Granderson, who again is emerging. You've got Davenport, who's been often injured, who's an enigma at this point. You don't know what he is. You've got an aging Cam Jordan on the other side. What do you do there again? Right. And then we didn't even get into the Malcolm Brown situation. Well, again, what he has meant to the run defense with again Shai Tuttle and a couple other young players that on the inside. To me, I think you got to do everything you can to be able to re-sign him. But ultimately, again, if the bidding gets too high, you got to step out.
But isn't it a commitment issue at this point? You commit certain amount of dollars to the position.
Yes.
I don't think Cam Jordan's going anywhere.
No
and
way.
He's probably another restructure candidate.
There's
simply
no doubt.
because you know he's a face of the franchise type of guy. I think it comes down to you might have to choose right now between Hendrickson and Davenport to keep Hendrickson, which means you'd have to trade Davenport and be able to get something back that makes it worth dealing him because of the question marks about his durability and will he ever reach his potential that his physical skills bring to the table. I think they might be stuck with having to roll the dice with a guy that cost them an extra first-round pick in Davenport. If you ask me right now if I think Hendrickson's going to be back, he seems like out of all the guys that you would like to keep, he might be the one that you have to lose.
Yeah, and I would agree, because just simply because of what the market is going to be for a pass rusher. And I don't, to your point, I don't know if they've given up on Davenport yet.
Right.
You know, at this point. But it's hard. I mean, again,
he brings more every down potential because
no doubt.
when he's healthy, he seals the edge. He can be a force against the run. He's shown signs of being an every down defensive end, which if you're going to pay big money to somebody, you want that and not somebody like Hendrickson who had some injury issues again this year. And you're going to pay a situational pass rusher 8 figures a year? I don't know.
Yep. That is one of the dilemmas they'll have to be dealing with. As I mentioned before, the other one is probably Malcolm Brown. Look, a lot of people, much like the Marcus Williams thing, where again, all of a sudden people are thinking, well, he's indispensable. Some people believe now that Malcolm Brown is dispensable at this point. And I'm of the opinion that the guy has been, every time he's been in, he's the major reason why this run defense is what it is. There's no doubt they got some young guys behind him that are much cheaper. The question is, can you work out a deal where you can maybe extend him and get a low cap number? I think it's got to be on the table. You don't want to let a guy like that walk out the door.
I think you have to, because you know what you're getting from him, and that's one part of this team as far as the strength goes that you don't want to risk losing in a bit of a transition situation for the whole roster. The fact that this team is elite against the run, that's something that they can rely upon, that gives them the ability to match up with teams in the league that a lot of other teams envy. I don't think you want to lose that, even with the other younger defensive tackles. Onyemata needs that type of space-eating, assignment-driven running mate. When you talk about the defensive tackle position, it makes too much sense to extend somebody in Brown, who's still young. He's on the right side of 30, so you can figure somebody like him's got the ability to age well, barring major injuries. So I think they'll figure that out with him.
What about Sheldon Rankins? Because he's also a question mark here because of the injury. Look, when he is healthy, he is as dominant as any player on the inside. But again, the problem is with multiple injuries, constant and the constant in and out the lineup, he's not reliable.
Right, and I think that might be something where the combination of not knowing what you're going to get moving forward with him because of the past 3 years, how they've gone, and the salary cap crunch around the league, he might not have quite the market. I don't think people are going to roll the dice on him being the best of Sheldon Rankins because they don't know what they're going to get game in, game out, and they're not going to allocate a certain amount of funds. Is he an every down guy? We haven't seen him be an every down guy in over 2 years. So that might help the Saints be able to retain him. Maybe he'll want a shorter deal to stay here, know he's going to play heavy snaps, and maybe rebuild his value when we move past this pandemic. More money's available. He's still young enough to make that decision after 5 years in the league.
Let's talk about the linebacker position again. Obviously, Demario Davis is the anchor there. They went out, they drafted Bond. Nothing really happened with that. Anzalone is probably on his way out because of really lack of production. We mentioned Quan Alexander, who came in really on a one-year deal, $13 million against the cap. There's no way they're going to pay him that. If he's released, it's zero dead money. It makes nothing but good sense considering the Achilles injury. I'm not saying he wouldn't be back. Right. I'm just saying, again, he's going to be back at a very, very small number, if at all. But the question is still asked, again, what do you do with that linebacker position now?
Right. Alexander can't be expected to be back because the timing of the injury during the season, there's no way to think he's going to be ready for September. But he may come back and be somebody who steps in later. But when you talk about an Achilles, those heal differently, and guys who have to cut and move around all the time, you can't count on him. Yes. So it comes down to Bond, second-year guy, has to be almost not penciled in, but inked in as a starter next to Davis. And after that, you don't have anybody because do you re-sign for Anzalone for anything more than the minimum and give him another chance to be depth? Yes. Maybe that happens because I can't think he impressed too many people around the league with his play this past year, getting a lot of opportunities. But they don't prioritize the linebacker position. Most of the time, you're only playing two. So you don't need really more than three that you know you can go to war with. So I think the Saints may feel comfortable maybe going the rookie linebacker route again and try to find a veteran near the end of his career that can fill in, that might be looking to play with a contender. I think that's low on the priority list because they're really lucky to have somebody in Demario Davis who's truly special there, and you only need to find somebody competent next to him, although they have a lot more expectations for Bond beyond that. He probably would have played a lot more and been a starter by the playoffs if not for the Alexander trade. If he'd have gotten those snaps, I think we would have seen a transition to see him playing ahead of Anzalone by the final 6 games of the season. Because he didn't get that, now he's more of an inexperienced question mark who was switching positions completely from college. He was more of an edge in a 3-4 defense. They believe he can be a really good 4-3 linebacker. I think that'll probably work out as well because from what we saw, the little bit we saw, he didn't look lost out there.
Right. I think we're both in agreement that Janoris Jenkins has to be extended with a good cap number. Marcus Williams, you can let him walk out the door because I think you can get what he brings to the table from another safety. Maybe you draft one that you're going to groom. Maybe you bring in a veteran safety. So let's move to the offensive side of the ball. And of course, the big question is quarterback. This morning, Philadelphia traded Carson Wentz to the Indianapolis Colts for a 2021 third-round pick, a conditional 2022 second-round pick that could become a first-round pick based upon performance. So again, we've seen now a few moves here with again what happened with Los Angeles, down with Philadelphia, with young quarterbacks that are moving on. What do you think happens here in New Orleans?
I think the Saints are, at this point, going to try to move forward with a re-sign Jameis Winston, who understands he'll have a real shot to be the guy this time competing against Taysom Hill in the final year of his current contract. I think they have to do it that way because these guys now know the system. We've seen Winston at his best be really good and truly an NFL starting quarterback who can win you games. Now at his worst, he can lose you those games. Maybe he's able to learn second year and a first full year in the system how it has to be for a guy to be an NFL quarterback on a contender, that you have to sometimes make the smart decision and give up on a play, not force the ball. I think you take a look at that because at worst, if your roster's still strong, we saw what the Saints look like for 4 games with Taysom Hill at quarterback. Can they be a team that still wins double-digit games with him over 16 games? I think so. Do I think they can make a run in the playoffs with what we've seen from Hill? No. But the point is, what's the floor of your season at quarterback? Your floor right now is having to start Taysom Hill, and there's no reason to think he can't get a little better. If he could be a little more consistent threatening defenses down the field. His deep ball wasn't very impressive, but it was more of a threat than when Drew Brees was out there. Then he's somebody that you can roll with and have another solid regular season. And if you look at it as a transition year and you know you don't have the money to get involved in these quarterback situations, you couldn't get involved with taking a risk on a guy like Carson Wentz because of the money, and you're just not in a position to be able to take that kind of risk, then yeah, you go with the devil you know versus the devil you don't know.
As far as Taysom Hill goes, it's a big cap number, $13 million. Although, again, he is a jack of all trades when you look at what he brings to the table on special teams and on the offense and, of course, as a quarterback. Do you expect him to be extended here?
I don't. I don't think that they know what he's going to be, so he's going to get that opportunity at least to compete in the preseason to be the quarterback for this team. And at that point, you're a guy that's going on 31, 32 years old. How long is that jack of all trades talent still going to be there?
Point.
So that made it worthwhile, not knowing what would happen with Breeze going into this season, to be able to extend him for that couple of years and pay him for that all-around ability. I think at this point he's a wait-and-see guy, and you're going to have a full idea of what you're going to be looking at a year from now, and you have to wait and see, because I just don't know if he's going to age that well the way he plays when he's not behind center. That physicality is as important as that speed and explosiveness.
No, I agree. And it is a legitimate question. And especially the salary you're paying him, Brandon, because you're paying him a quarterback salary.
Right.
Okay, not a
low-end guy.
But still,
you know, combined with Winston, that's a number that you can make work. It still won't be on the high end of quarterback money, but you'll have two instead of one.
True.
So, I mean, again, if one position that you have to trust Sean Payton to get the best out of it, even though he hasn't had to for a full season as the Saints coach, it's going to be quarterback.
Saints have, as far as draft choices go, their own first-round pick, second-round pick. They're expected to get 2 compensatory third-round picks, one for the Teddy Bridgewater, one for Terry Fontenot moving on to Atlanta to become their general manager, and their own 4th-round pick. We had a question from an individual watching on YouTube. Do you expect the Saints to draft a quarterback in this particular draft?
Expect? I don't think we can expect anything, because you just don't know how the draft board's going to fall. I don't think they're going to force anything, and I just don't know after you talk about the top 5. I guess there's a top 5. I have real questions, and I don't understand the love affair with Trey Lance from North Dakota State. He's hardly played, and he hasn't been asked to run anything close to an NFL offense, so he's a real projection. But I do understand it with the other guys. I don't think Mac Jones, who's the guy that makes sense as a potential available player at 28, I don't think he's going to be available at 28. I think there'll be 5 QBs gone well before the Saints pick, and after that, do you force it? Do you like the guy from Florida? I mean, I don't know. Maybe not in the first round. Maybe you take your chances with teams being able to gamble early in the first round, that they won't be looking early in the second round, so you might be able to come back around even if you need to trade up to be able to get a guy in the second round. After that, I just don't know if you're in the right spot to even think about forcing the issue at quarterback unless there's a sure thing, and I don't see any sure things on the board after the top 2 or 3.
Do you mortgage the future for Deshaun Watson?
I mean, it would be great if they could, because I think he's worth it, but I don't think they have the capital to pull it off. I don't think the Texans are going to take what the Saints have to offer, which is veteran players who can help you. I mean, the Saints could deal some real legitimate guys, and that would help make the salary swaps work as well. But I think the Texans, if they make that deal, there's a reason why they've leaked out that it's really going to be the Jets with the number 2 overall pick, so they can get their quarterback of the future. They can get other picks on top of that. They can clear salary cap space. That's the problem. The Saints don't have enough overall assets, and I don't think they want to be going into giving up multiple first-round picks and players, because you'd have to put guys like Michael Thomas on the table, Alvin Kamara on the table, and I don't think they want to do that.
What about another veteran coming in? Again, if you, to me, you've got to have at least another veteran. Look, if they draft a quarterback, they draft a quarterback, but you still need a veteran in case something happens, right? I mean, and that veteran is not going to be a high-end paid veteran. It's going to be your traditional backup.
Right, and does that veteran, maybe the better of those veterans that are available, you think of Ryan Fitzpatrick, that might have a chance to play, or he knows what's going on in Miami and what he experienced, even though he was the better option, Tua Tagovailoa is going to play. So maybe that does work out, that you can get one of the higher end guys who think, hey, I can take a chance here and get on the field. But I think that only works out if you don't re-sign Jameis Winston. It's going to be Winston and Hill, and if it's not Winston with Hill, then it opens the door for that type of player that has started and done so recently and had success in the league. But I think you're worse off then, because the ceiling isn't as great as it is with Winston. I would take the chance with Jameis.
Yeah, I would too. All right, let's take worst case scenario here. There is a market for Jameis Winston, okay? And there are teams out there that are willing to outbid the Saints. Where do they go from here?
If that were to happen, then I think it is a spot where you're looking at the Ryan Fitzpatricks of the world, those type of free agents who can give you some security behind what you're going to go with. And it has to be Taysom Hill as the starter, because he did start the 4 games last year. And I think that might make them a little bit more aggressive as far as moving up the draft board. If they, for example, if it were Mac Jones, who did impress a lot of people at the Senior Bowl with his overall control, his accuracy, and the fact that he does have a good enough arm. they might be more aggressive in trading up the board for somebody like that or anybody that they think is slipping, but it would have to be first-round caliber.
Yes. All right, we'll shift gears as we go to break and hear from our underwriters. We'll come back. We'll talk some college baseball, college basketball, also get into the Pelicans today. All that coming up here on Inside New Orleans Sports. Our guest today is Jude Young of CrescentCitySports.com and 106.1 FM, and, of course, the voice of the UNO Privateers. We'll be right back.
For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Experiencing rough weather with a bad roof can be a nightmare. It doesn't have to be.
Suburban Roofing, because when it comes to roofing, there is a difference.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing
Ultimate half court, yeah.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. Jude Young is with us. I'm your host, Eric Asher. We shift gears to the college game, and we're gonna talk college basketball and also some college football and baseball. But let's start off with UNO Privateers, the voice of the UNO Privateers. Basketball right now, 4-13, 3-6 in the Southland. The big question is, do they have enough to make the Southland Conference tournament?
I think they do if the games are played. At this point, another game was lost this weekend that I don't know how the league's going to be able to reschedule. They were supposed to go to McNeese, who struggled in the league, so that's a game you didn't want to lose.
Right.
After that, though, you've got to play 7 games in the final 2+ weeks of the season, so how much is that going to exhaust you? The bright side, if there is one there, is the rest of the league is facing the same thing. It's going to be a battle of attrition down the stretch. Look, this UNO team has proven it can score, but they're undersized in the front court. That has hurt them badly, and I don't know if that problem is going to go away. So they're going to have to be consistent in the second halves of games where they've lost leads and find a way to get over the top. Mark Schlesinger is a coach who doesn't like to play zone, but he's mixed some more of it in there. I think you have to be able to figure out a way for teams not to beat you up on the inside. They have this extra time to prepare for this tough stretch. They'll play again, hopefully, on Monday at home. I expect that they're good enough to at least get to the Southland tournament, but if things would have worked out differently with the schedule not being so compact, they might have had an opportunity to battle for a much better seed than they wound up with.
Start talking about the baseball team. Well, last year, Blake Dean, look, he had a really, really good team. COVID took that away from him. What's the outlook this year?
Well, I think they're going to be deep and talented and capable again. But when we talk about college baseball in general, across the board, the depth and quality is going to be better than we've ever seen because of the shortened 5-round baseball draft, now shrinking down the farm system. I think college baseball's quality is going to keep going up, and therefore the eyes on it nationally are going to continue to rise. And when you look at UNO, they're in a really good conference in the Southland. The Southland is very, very good in baseball and football, and baseball's even more impressive because that's truly played on the highest level. So they were picked 5th or 6th, depending on where you look in the league, and that's behind some Louisiana schools like the always good Southeastern that's been picked, I think, 3rd pretty much universally, but McNeese is picked second, and they're a talented team. Look, it's a good conference. I think UNO is going to be competitive. I think all you have to do in the Southland is think about making the conference tournament to get yourself a chance to play for the NCAAs, because the league's so tough, and you're going to play 40 league games now because of COVID-19. They decided to play 4-game weekends, which means double headers on Saturdays. But fortunately, UNO and other programs will have the depth to be able to pull that off, and there's going to be a really game-to-game exciting to watch, especially when teams like UNO are in very good conferences.
And you'll be able to hear the games now, right?
That's right. We'll have every weekend opening series game on Nash Icon 106.1 FM. My good friend Emmanuel Pepis will have the call of baseball this year, and exciting midweek games, including, unfortunately, because of COVID, we'll have just one meeting with Tulane when there's usually been 3 in the Pelican Cup. That'll be early in the season. And LSU and Paul Maneri gracious enough to come back to his alma mater to play at Maestri Field. That will be one of the marquee midweek games we'll have on Nash Icon as well.
Beautiful. Let's talk about Tulane. They're 9-8 in basketball. Overall, 4-8 in the American. Your thoughts?
Well, I think the progress has been shown. They're not able to compete with the very best teams in that league. Nobody in the conference is on Houston's level.
Yes.
But what they've been able to do is prove that they're not a total basement-dwelling type program, and that's the progress Ron Hunter was looking for. Jalen Forbes, the Alabama transfer, is starting to play really well as sort of the lead dog, the guy who can get them buckets when they need it. I think the progress has been good, and they have to be happy with it, and Hunter's such a good coach. I think he'll get it right to get Tulane on the level so that they can compete for 500 or better in the conference, because he simply is somebody that talent wants to play for. But at the same time, we've talked about it many times, Tulane, the facilities, even with the money they put in it, in basketball, bottom of the league, it's really hard to win those recruiting battles against fellow schools that have invested, I think, a little bit more in basketball overall. But if anybody can do it, I think Hunter will. And it's fun to watch the Green Wave play now. They're competitive in every game.
Much like UNO, Travis Jewett had a nice team last year, which again got usurped by COVID-19. What's the outlook for their baseball team?
Well, they're going to have an excellent rotation on the weekends. They return starters from front to back. Braden Oldhoff is one of the better aces in the country. He was unbelievable in the 4 games he got to pitch last year. I think gave up 1 total run in the 4 games and won them all. So he's somebody that can win you those Friday night games and give Tulane a chance to compete in the American, which is a really good baseball league. But a lot of newcomers, and a lot of them on the offensive side. Will they have the production there? That's the real question mark. Talent coming in, but we haven't seen them prove it yet.
Let's talk about the football team coming off a pretty good recruiting class for Willie Fritz. Also added 4 graduate transfers. Your thought of the state of the Tulane football team?
Well, I think they're going to be a consistent team at the very least moving forward, where, sure, it's going to be a struggle at this point until we see better, moving beyond that 500 type record and just trying to get into a bowl game. But you've got a young quarterback who got all the experience in the world and as a true freshman and impressed a lot of people coming back. Can he take you beyond what you've gotten at that position during the Fritz era? You'll go as far as the quarterback can take you, because I think the overall talent and balance on the roster will be there. Are you ever going to be a dominant defense? Probably not. I don't think that league is a league where a dominant defense can happen, but we did see close to it with what Cincinnati and Tulsa were able to do, so it can be done. At the same time, you've got to be able to outscore people, and they're only going to go as far as now with a new offensive coordinator where that offense can go to be able to keep up in shootouts that make the difference between winning 6 games and talking about winning 8 or 9 and competing for a spot in the conference title game.
Yeah. Let's shift gears to LSU. Let's talk basketball first. LSU, the basketball team now 13-6, 8-4. They got big wins over Mississippi State and Tennessee, which moved their RPI into the top 30. They were dropped as low as 47 before those wins. Your thoughts on LSU basketball?
Well, there's enough talent there for them to get it right at the right time. Right now, they're projected to be around an 8 or 9 seed, depending on where you look, making the NCAA tournament. They're still in, or were tied for second before Arkansas was able to play earlier this week. They don't have the marquee wins, though. It was big for them to beat Tennessee, at least at home, but I don't think that even qualifies as marquee. They're in a spot where they have to finish strong because they can play themselves right out of the tournament. If they get in, when you have star power like a Cam Thomas, and Trendon Watford hasn't been as consistent, but he can be a guy who takes over games. So you got 2 guys who can take over games, and Javonte Smart is a steady lead guard, athletes all around. I tell you what, they can still put it together, but I don't worry about the offensive end. Can Will Wade figure it out defensively?
That's it.
He committed far too much to being a team that's trying to play 94 feet and pressure people, and the defensive breakdowns were startling. They're not dominant inside defensively. Sharif O'Neal's injury issues have been a big problem there because you don't have that rim protection. But you do have athletes who can switch and be versatile in the half court. That's something Wade didn't want to commit to. He comes from that havoc background of playing 94 feet from VCU, and I think that hurt him and has hurt him even this season because he hasn't gotten the potential defensive quality that you can get out of the athletes that he has, and still enough depth, even with a Charles Manning transferring out, not having O'Neal. They still have plenty of depth. They're showing signs of figuring that out as a coaching staff and getting that out of the players, and they can be dangerous because they can flat out score. At the same time, I still don't trust it. I think it's hard to change your identity midstream this late in the year, and I don't know if that's in Will Wade's DNA. He's a better recruiter than he is a game coach.
Yeah. Let's talk about the baseball team. Paul Maneri, look, last year would have been an incredible year for baseball in Louisiana. He has a very, very deep pitching staff at LSU right now. Position players, again, really don't have the experience, but yet expected to be a really good team. But only picked fourth in the Western Division of the SEC.
You can be picked in the top 10 in the country and still be picked fourth.
Right.
That tells you how deep the SEC is, and you're facing quality depth across the board, and a lot of teams have no issues with pitching because of the talent they were able to retain and not lose to the pros. So the pitching should be there. But it is important that Jaden Hill, who has ace, top of the draft potential, that he can prove that he can stay healthy. They'll be careful with him early in the season to build him up, but they're fortunate that they have Landon Marceau, quality guy who could be an ace on a lot of teams as the second starter, and A.J. Labus has been somebody who's proven now he can stay healthy, and he's a quality pitcher along the lines of Marceau, who knows how to pitch. All the arms they have behind them, including some left-handers they can now rely upon. The pitching's going to be fantastic, but there are a lot of question marks in that lineup. Talent that hasn't done it yet at the college level, and there'll be so much mixing and matching. I don't think you'll see the same lineup from game to game for the first month of the season easy with Maneri trying to find the right combinations there.
You mentioned the Southeastern Conference. It is tough.
Yeah.
It is tough. And so, I mean, look, it's Omaha bust when it comes to LSU. Is this an Omaha team?
I think that it has a ceiling of an Omaha team, but at the same time, will they play well enough and put together the type of record in the regular season where you have to at least get to, say, 17 or 18 wins out of 30 in the conference to be in the conversation to be a host? Will they be able to do that against a tough schedule that they play? I think it's a coin toss. I mean, it's much harder when you're a 2 seed going on the road the first weekend of the NCAA tournament to think you're going to make it to Omaha. If they at least host the first weekend, then you like their chances because the pitching's good enough.
Right. And of course, hosting, it has always been about revenue in the past.
Right.
We don't know where we'll be with COVID-19 if revenue is even going to be in the equation here.
Right, exactly.
Okay, because in the past you could chalk it up. LSU's going to get a regional.
Sure, and if anything, if it's a toss-up, the team that simply has the best quality of the season isn't going to have LSU get an advantage they've gotten at times to be able to host even when they've been on the fence.
With that said, you mentioned Southeastern Conference very, very, very tough this year.
Yeah, no doubt. And look, Vanderbilt is always going to be a school because of their setup with students not paying tuition, so they basically get scholarships across the board. They're going to get crazy talent to come in all over the place. And Kumar Rocker might be the #1 overall pick as a pitcher, just to lead things off, but they have depth there. And Florida may have the best weekend pitching staff in the country. Fortunately, those teams are in the East now, but I'm not even talking about the depth that every team in the West believes that they can contend for Omaha.
What about Louisiana as a whole? Again, always seems to have great baseball. It's one of the things that make the midweek games really exciting because you've got such great competition here in Louisiana. How will it be?
Well, Louisiana Tech's going to be really good. I start with them because we may not pay attention to what their baseball program has become the last 3 or 4 years. Parker Bates is the consensus player of the year in that conference, one of the better hitters in the country. They've got a brand new ballpark, which is beautiful because they had to rebuild from the tornadoes a couple of years ago. So they're excited about what they can do in Conference USA. What will Louisiana Lafayette be? I don't know because Tony Robichaux's untimely death and then losing most of last season. We don't know what they're going to bring to the table, but they recruit well. They have a beautiful facility. They're able to bring in talent, and I assume they're going to be competitive in the Sun Belt at the very least. The Southland, as I talked about, McNeese and Southeastern picked second and third behind what's been a mid-major powerhouse in Sam Houston State. And I think UNO has a chance to be a surprising dark horse with their talent and ability. And it feels like it's time for Blake Teen to take the program that another step forward from being a winning program that battles to make the league tournament to do more. I'm excited to see how they do as well.
Let's talk some LSU football. Coming off what is now being talked about as a top 3 class in terms of recruiting. Of course, there have been some changes on the coaching staff. We'll get into that in a moment. Just overall recruiting, how do you think they did?
I think they did well because they got the most elite talent they could get their hands on. I think everybody's pointed out that the lack of offensive linemen is disappointing, so they're going to be loading up, and they already have 3 fantastic commitments already for next year's class. But that also means something that we'll see more and more of, where we saw Mike Jones Jr. from Clemson transferring in to help fill the gaps at linebacker. I think you'll see that probably over the next offseason to be able to do that with the offensive line.
Right.
When we talk about recruiting for Ed Orgeron, his most important recruiting job might have been the players he was able to retain.
No doubt.
You know, to retain a dozen guys who were all considering going to the NFL, including your entire offensive line. Look, that was extremely important, and that means this team has the ability to make 5-5 a distant memory. There's no reason to think that they can't contend this year because it starts with having multiple excellent options at quarterback.
Yes.
I don't know if it's going to be a battle if Miles Brennan's healthy. He's going to get the call first.
Right.
But I am one of those people that I would prefer to see the long-term potential of Max Johnson play out this year, but he might have to wait his turn.
With that said, Coach O said on Baton Rouge Radio this week that the Joe Brady offense is back. Jake Pease is the offensive coordinator. DJ Mangus is the passing coordinator. George Munoz comes back. Talk a little bit about, again, this offense, and I guess the expectations is to see a lot of what we saw with Joe Brady.
Right, and hey, quarterback is a big part of that, but you're going to get production there. Can you get the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly? I think a lot of that we saw this year that was a struggle at times, not only the offensive line struggling to gel and not blocking as well, but you weren't getting the ball out of the quarterback's hands quickly, in part because of the inexperience at the position, in part because of the design of the offense. I think a lot of these decisions, a lot of completions in modern offense happen before the snap. The pre-snap reads are important.
No doubt.
The understanding of where the ball needs to go should be 90% of the time decided before the ball is even snapped. And I think that's where bringing these guys from Joe Brady, his recommendation, working with him, having that foundation of already having that in your playbook is going to work out really well for LSU this year because there's no excuse. The talent's there. Keyshawn Butte is going to be an All-American. The way he finished his freshman year. So you've managed to lose 3 guys who are all going to wind up being first-round NFL picks, including Justin Jefferson, who could have been Rookie of the Year in the league. And you've replaced them. I think the talent's there that you're going to keep the machine rolling, and this is going to be one of the top offenses in college football.
On the defensive side, big changes when it comes to coaches. Again, we talked about it on the radio show and of course this program. They wanted to get younger. They got younger. They wanted to have more African Americans on the staff. They were able to do that as well. Durante Jones is now the defensive coordinator. Blake Baker has defensive coordinator ability, and of course he's had his experience, but he will be the linebacker coach. And former NFL player Andre Carter is defensive line coach. Your thoughts on those changes?
Well, the combination of guys who should be relatable and guys who have enough of a resume to believe that they can come in and do the job. I know Jones doesn't have much coordinating experience, but coaching in the league is important. You've got that same sort of experience in the secondary now with that hire. I just think that they're going to be a much more solid defense. Ed Orgeron was excited about the idea of replacing Dave Aranda and having somebody come in and be more aggressive on defense.
Right.
But there was way too much of all or nothing sort of philosophy, and it hurt them from the very first game against Mississippi State, and this team really struggled to adjust. I think you're going to have a defense that's much more in line with what a pro defense can do. You don't have to be dynamic, but you have to be a defense that can play as much zone as it plays man and match up with the matchup of a given week, and they weren't able to do that last year, but the talent is there to do it coming up this year. I worry a little bit about how the combination of the veterans coming back at safety and really young players like Sage Ryan, Mr. Louisiana is expected to play right away. You're still going to have to be able to mix them in and do it early, especially playing UCLA right off the bat in a non-conference game. So there will be challenges there, but I think there'll be a much more solid defense that isn't hurt by the explosive play than what we saw in this past 10-game year.
You know, Jude, I ask this question all the time, and I guess it's only going to be answered on the field, but I get it. You know, Ed was able to re-recruit his own players. There's an excitement about the offensive line coming back, the defensive line. But again, I can go back in my mind's eye, and I can go back week to week and talk about the troubles that offensive line, that defensive line had. What's the panacea here? The extra year? I mean, these guys, they couldn't handle SEC play for the most part. They underachieved. I get they're coming back, and that gives them another year. But again, look, across the board, a lot of teams had guys come back with the opportunity to come back because of COVID-19. Some of those guys could have gone pro. Some of those guys might have got drafted. Some might not have. I understand the enthusiasm of them coming back, but there's got to be a real ramp up in the type of play that we didn't see last year that we hope to see this year.
Oh, sure. They were no doubt, though, caught in a serious transition. They had the offensive line of the year in college football, and then 4 of them disappear. So you're trying to replace all that talent and come together with different quarterback play, different leadership there, and you don't have Joe Brady anymore. So sure, there was going to be issues with gelling, and then you have the offseason that you had, or lack thereof, the weird extended preseason. So many issues, I think, behind the scenes with chemistry as well that you talked about, and getting the coaching staff younger on both sides and more relatable to the players should help in that area. Let's be fair, Ed Orgeron screwed up the offseason. I think he was a little bit high on the hog as far as doing what he did, going 15-0, and those blips on the radar can't happen very often, and nobody's going to accept that moving forward. They'll even let go the idea that you hired the wrong defensive coordinator. Okay, but now there has to be solidity behind the scenes in order to get it done on the field. And just specifically the offensive line, I think that Liam Shanahan coming over as a transfer from Harvard, who hadn't played center, hadn't been in an SEC weight program, he should get better. And you have that intelligence in the middle of your line. Now that he's experienced playing the position, that should benefit everybody. They're really good and talented at guard. There should be a lot of competition there. And I think Ed Ingram is a future NFL starter who had to take the long road because of off-the-field issues. If he plays at an all-SEC level and Shanahan's solid at center, I think it'll all fall together for the O-line.
And, of course, having an experienced quarterback helps as well. And all those quarterbacks now have some semblance of experience.
Right. And, again, that's why I think they'll go with Miles Brennan, because he's been in the program so long. He's been in a true Joe Brady-like passing coordinated system before. So it's going to be his job. But he's also somebody you still worry about being able to take the hits. He didn't last a month as a starter the first time around, so it's good to know Johnson's there. I don't want to slight T.J. Finley, but I'm just much higher on
It's going to be a numbers game, especially with, again, the recruits that have already committed to the program. Some of these guys are not going to be there. They're going to move on to other programs.
Right. Garrett Nussmeier is the son of another former NFL quarterback and an offensive coordinator.
Walker Howard coming.
Yeah. So I think it's going to be awfully difficult for Finley in particular to stick around, but he'll have plenty of suitors on the open market if he goes into the portal.
Oh, come on! Look at just the measurables. Look at it. I mean, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. Let's shift to the Pelicans. 12-16 now. Lost the heartbreaker on Wednesday night to Portland in the Smoothie King Center, 126-124. The big news over the last week or so is, again, Stan Van Gundy calling out his team for lack of defensive commitment. I mean, I'm paraphrasing here. He wonders if defense is even in some of his players' DNA. This has been an ongoing issue for this team, not just under Stan Van Gundy, under Alvin Gentry. The last time this team played defense was when Rajon Rondo was in the uniform, and that's the last time you saw any really semblance of defense by a New Orleans professional basketball team. Look, I've wondered out loud the same thing. I said they have to go out and get some dogs on defense. That has to be if you're going to play with a coach who ultimately decides that the cornerstone of what his program is to be able to defend, then you got to have players that can defend. They don't have those on that team right now. Not consistently defending, that can also make up for, again, maybe the lack of defensive prowess from some of the other players on the team.
Well, Van Gundy himself is saying that it's want to, not ability. That's what that message tends not only to the players, but it sends it to the front office publicly, which coaches will do sometimes. But at the same time, you have to question not only the leadership, especially those not having those dogs or guys that are filling those roles, but you question the leadership as far as the head coach goes and understanding what kind of scheme you should be putting out on the floor. The Pelicans are so, I say paranoid. I think it's flat out paranoia, the defensive strategy that Van Gundy has put in place about giving up easy buckets and taking care of the lane and around the rim, that they're giving up way too many uncontested three-pointers in the league. Right, everybody trying to get the threes. Yeah, and it's killing them on a night-in, night-out basis. And then on top of that, he's blown a couple of games, including this most recent one, by not understanding what you need to do close and late. The whole struggles early in the season after a good start started with him botching the Indiana Pacers home game. That was a game they should have won. He didn't have Zion on the floor. Then Zion's emerging as a point forward. Yes. Somebody you can put the ball in his hands. He's either going to score or create. He's that talented, and he's showing it, and he was brilliant and posted a career high scoring-wise and was setting up teammates, and then you're in a two-point game at the end. He doesn't get the basketball in his hands.
Unforgivable.
And again, part of the problem here is I think Van Gundy is one of those coaches who has a background of relying more on his veterans, and his veterans aren't paying him back in kind.
It's true.
Eric Bledsoe is supposed to be a plus defender. We haven't seen it. I think Steven Adams has worked out, and at this point he has to play because even with Hernangomez playing better as the backup big replacing Jackson Hayes, it comes down to how well you defend on the perimeter. Both preventing guys doing it off the bounce and being able to close out on three-point shooters. And even with Lonzo Ball being good at that and fitting in this defense, you're not getting the leadership from those guys. J.J. Redick wants out, so you're not seeing him play up to his potential. They've got to fix that problem first. And that includes the ball problem, because I don't believe at this point they can pay him what somebody will.
Yes.
So you've got to move him.
I agree.
And again, retaining assets and being ready to use them when the right time comes, that's got to be the number one concern for David Griffin in that front office.
To your point about, again, closing out on three-point shooters, in the NBA today, if you leave space, if they're a guy that has space, he's going to knock the shot down. And the issue is, again, they're not closing out on the shooters quick enough, and they're leaving guys open, and guys are knocking down shots. Ultimately, again, it's about effort and energy on the defensive side of the ball. They're not getting it night after night.
Right. And again, it comes back to the idea of, is it really laziness? Is it really lack of want to? Because when I look at this team struggle to defend the three, I see them sag so far down. That is not a sign of laziness. That makes me think that's part of the strategy. If you've got a foot in the lane or 2 feet in the lane, you're not closing out a three-point shot, but you're seeing these guys on the perimeter do that so often. I just don't get the philosophy. That's coaching. That's team coaching. That was focused on from the first day of that shortened training camp and right into the regular season. That's what they're being coached to do. That's why I point my finger at Van Gundy, and he needs to figure out a way to make it work instead of trying to call out players. I don't think it's an effort problem.
Right. Well, it'd be interesting to see again how this kind of plays out going forward. Pelicans got a tough homestand, but look, you've got to be able to string wins together. When you lose 8 of 9, you've got to be able to start to string wins together. They're not out of this by any stretch, but again, it's time for them to start getting on a little bit of a winning streak here consistently.
And I think Brandon Ingram needs to be a more consistent decision maker and more consistent over 40 minutes, where he seems to start off games really well and fades away as Zion Williamson takes over. Those two need to mesh together and work well together. And again, that's on Van Gundy and his coaching staff. What can I do to keep Ingram engaged when it becomes the Williamson show, so that at the end of the game, when I do want to have Ingram involved, they can work together? Because we're not seeing that in a couple of close losses simply because the chemistry isn't working out. And again, it's not on the young players. It's on the head coach to be able to put them in the best positions to win. Coaching still matters in the NBA.
Jude Young, CrestCitySports.com, 106.1 FM, and of course the voice of the UNO Privateers. Thanks so much, Jude. Appreciate you joining us.
Pleasure.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Plenty of ways to watch this show now. Remember, there's a rebroadcast on WLAE-TV tonight at 6 p.m. On The Deuce, WLAE-TV 2, every Thursday night at 10 p.m. Friday night across Southeast Louisiana, 9 o'clock on Pelican Sports Television, 10 o'clock on WLAE-TV, Saturday 2 a.m. on WLAE-TV 2, and then 5 p.m. on Pelican Sports Television. We're also, again, live streaming on YouTube every single Thursday at 1 p.m. as this show goes live on WLAE-TV. You catch all the previous episodes at ericasher.com, also the WLAE-TV YouTube page, and on our social media platforms as well. Don't forget to catch me on the radio, again, weekdays 4 to 6 on 106.1 FM. You can listen live on the iHeartRadio app, the TuneIn Radio app. Also, again, the podcast of the show is available on all the major podcasting platforms. Again, special thanks to Jude Young for joining us on the program. Also to our fantastic underwriters who sponsor this program. Please consider supporting those underwriters, and to the WLE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Tommy Fairley, Tommy O'Connor, and my director, William Hill. For Jude Young, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports.